And we'll go back to the top of the calendar. The next bill we're going to hear is mine, 5069. Ladies and gentlemen, there's an act relating to education, equitable access for all students. And this legislation would make several changes in our law. It would require that charter public schools actively recruit students from throughout the districts and municipalities that the charter serves, and would also require an equal representation of special education students, English language learners, students who qualify for free and reduced lunches, and equalized demographic numbers that are met from the charter and the public school. And my biggest concern has been with charter schools is this. Charter schools rely on lotteries that parents or an advocate or a guardian submit to the lottery. What happens to students that do not have a parent advocate, that don't have a guardian to advocate for them? And if we look at Survey Works from 2019, in terms of parental engagement, 46%, almost half of the public school parents have stated they have little or no involvement with their public school. And those of us who are involved in education know that school culture and the quality of education within a school is greatly enhanced by family involvement. When you take parent advocates out of especially our urban districts, it negatively impacts school culture. And I always think back to my career. My last position was developing a small school, and I hate this term, but people get what it means, for students at risk. They're involved with the law. They may have been on probation. They've been suspended. About 40% of them had IEPs. We also had a transition program. And I would take the time during the summer to reach out to their parents, guardians, foster parents, advocates. And I'll never forget, a social worker brought in a young lady, and I'm just going to call her Kathy, and said, "Mr. Mack, could you please see her?" And I said, "Sure, just have her come in, bring her in with her, mom." So she came in, parent wasn't there. And we met, and I said, "I would really love to meet with your mother so she knows what our expectations are and what's going on in the school, what the rules of the school are." So she said, "I promise, I'll get my mother in within a month." And I was up in the cafeteria about 3 weeks later, and my administrative assistant called on the walkie-talkie and said, "Mr. Mack, could you come down to the office? Kathy's here with her mom." I said, "Oh, great, I'll be right down." Go down. Kathy's there. I said, "Hey, Kathy, is your mom here?" Said, "Would you mind going out? She's not feeling well. Would you mind going out to the car to talk to her?" I said, "Not at all." Go out to the parking lot. There's an old car that's pulled up. Looks like it just got out of a demolition derby. It's all banged up. There's a gentleman who is leaning over, kind of looks like he's snoozing, trying to slightly passed out on the driver's wheel. Next to him is someone else with their head up against the window. In the back seat, there's a figure with a hoodie on. Kathy knocks on the window comes down, and she says, Mom, this is Mr. McNamara. He wants to speak with you. I look at her eyes are pinned, roll back, and I realize that this is more than just a parental meeting. So I said, I'm going to say Smith, my name is Mr. McNamara. I'm the principal of this school. I just want to tell you that we are going to work with Kathy to make sure that she graduates and do everything we can to help her. And if you need anything at home, we have a social worker and we'll work with you. Well, Kathy ended up graduating. It took 5 years. But my point is, who is going to advocate for kids that don't have a parent and guardian? And we can't continue to take some of the best advocates that we have for education out of the system. So I would ask that charters develop and demonstrate a process for reaching out and reaching these students who do not have someone at home, whether it's a language barrier, cultural issues. They have to make a demonstrated effort to get these students in. And also our special education students. And I realize many high cost students that are medically involved and have multiple disabilities choose public schools because we have a reputation of meeting their needs. However, charter schools were designed to be this experiment. And it's not an experiment that is just for a particular type of student. It's supposed to be for all students. So I'd like to see them step up and demonstrate and serve as that experimental exercise that we supported over the years for charter schools. And you can't do it unless you have a demographic profile that, to me, addresses the needs of all children. So, sorry about that long-winded explanation. Are there any questions from me? Thank you. First witness is Mr. James Parisi of the American Federation of Teachers, who supports this. Welcome, Mr. Parisi of the American Federation of Teachers and Healthcare Professionals.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members, for hearing me. I'll just take a couple minutes of your time. My union supports Chairman McNamara's bill that would ensure that the population in charter schools reflects the sending districts. During the recent legislative debate over the charter school moratorium, a bill the Senate's actually taking up this afternoon, we took a closer look at some of the schools seeking expansion comparing to the public school district. And a Central Falls teacher at the hearing, for example, testified that the local charter school, Segue, never matched the state or district average for students with IEPs during its entire existence. And to put a finer point on that, Central Falls Schools has just over 20% of its students with IEPs. Segue has about 6%. That's a big disparity, and that low number doesn't even reflect what I've heard in that the charters, amongst the number of students with IEPs, don't have those high-cost special needs students that regular neighborhood public schools have. Similarly, Achievement First has just under 8% students with IEPs in Providence and North Providence. The two communities that are going to feed the expansion have about 16 and 18.5% respectively. So until these disparities are addressed, we think one of two things. You either address it on the enrollment side, which this bill does, and failure to enact a bill like this, we think it's really important then that the Assembly take a look at the whole charter funding mechanism, because this issue has to be addressed in order to protect the interest of the students in our neighborhood schools. Finally, there's some other provisions in the bill about requiring more Rhode oversight on the student enrollment practices, requiring an annual report from Rhode to the Assembly on charter enrollment. We think those are terrific provisions, and I just wanted to mention those as well. I appreciate everyone's attention, and thank you for hearing out our testimony.
Any questions for Mr. Parisi? Thank you, Mr. Parisi.
Thank you, Chairman.
The next witness is Elizabeth Winnigan. Welcome, Elizabeth. Please proceed.
Chairman McNamara and members of the House Education Committee, my name is Elizabeth Winnigan, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my testimony tonight. I am here to oppose House Bill 5069. Fundamentally, at Achievement First, we're aligned with the intent of this bill. We want to serve students that reflect the districts that we serve, 100%. There are barriers. I think you mentioned some, but they're worth reiterating. Rhode Island state law mandates that we run a blind lottery when we create a wait list for students who do not get chosen in the lottery. We are required to choose the next student on the lottery list when a seat becomes available. This year, the Rhode Island Department of Education, I think importantly, launched a new initiative to centralize charter school enrollment systems statewide. All charter schools have the opportunity to be on Rhode's simplified enrollment platform, and we are proud to be a part of this initiative. To date, we've received well over 2,000 applications, and I truly believe this is a step to really helping families who maybe traditionally don't apply for lotteries access lotteries in a much more centralized location, so we don't have families having to apply to, say, 10 different schools for one child, which is very burdensome for families. So I think this is a true step in the right direction to meeting the goal that this bill is intended to inspire. The other thing is that at Achievement First in particular, we generally enroll kids at the kindergarten level. Most students haven't been identified as English language learners or special education students when they're entering K. Some have. And so we can't control that. We're not allowed to even ask questions on the lottery application about background, English language learner status, special education status, or anything like that. It's truly a blind lottery. So we don't have that information. The other thing I think is important to consider is that the demographics and the backgrounds of children really, really vary among traditional public schools as well. So when you look at Providence, for example, even among elementary schools, the special education rates, the multilingual learner rates just vary considerably across Providence public elementary schools. And there's a really stark contrast between classical, for example, and other Providence high schools, being a test-in school. So again, if the goal of this bill is to create equitable opportunities and school environments for all of our students and teachers, it would make sense to try to ensure the similar situation across traditional schools. And again, they'd face similar challenges because at enrollment, the moment of enrollment, oftentimes you don't have access to the information that would allow this to happen. Lastly, I would say, since we started our schools in Rhode Island, in Providence in particular, we've been on the Providence Public School registration form at K, and every family has to go register their child in Providence for kindergarten. And through that process, families have always had the opportunity to just check a box and come into our lottery. So this, I think, has actually resulted in our demographics largely reflecting the districts that we serve. And I provided written testimony with a graph that sort of delineates where our percentages are. Thank you very much for listening to me tonight.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Are there any questions for this witness?
Chairman.
Representative Vice Chair Amore, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Elizabeth, would a holistic lottery be the answer to that? So forget checking a box. We just take the entire enrollment of a district and we pull the lottery from that, a blind lottery from that, and it can be an opt-out system. So
I would love that.
You're chosen, and then you can say, no, I prefer not to go to that school. And then we're getting the entire enrollment rather than just those that checked off a box or later on just managed to fill out the application.
Yeah, I think that would be a great system.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll amend it to holistic enrollment. Rep. Bia, do you have a question?
No,
All set?
all set.
Yes. Representative Giraldo, the great city of Central Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping if the speaker could talk about RIDE Simplified Enrollment a little bit more and what that process looks like.
Yeah, so RIDE launched a new platform this year. It's called Enroll RI, and there's two sides to the system, an enrollment side and then a side that houses advanced course network opportunities, so opportunities that have traditionally been for high school students but now are really K-12, which is very cool. But the side of the system that I think we want to focus on for the purposes of this hearing are the Enroll RI side. And what RIDE has created is a platform where families can apply. Essentially, a family can go into the Enroll RI platform. It's a very, very simple app that you can download on your phone. You put in your name and your address, and immediately the app will tell you all of the charter schools that you can apply for based on your address, because every school has catchment areas, or very few schools are statewide. And then parents can check a bunch of boxes based on what they're interested in, like say parents want after-school programs or a particular music or arts program or various things. And they will get a provided list of schools that they are eligible to apply for, and they fill out one application, and it goes to all the schools. And ultimately the system is going to be ranked, and so not this year, but starting next year, RIDE is actually going to run the lotteries.
Okay.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Very interesting. Any further questions for this witness? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice
Thank you.
night.
And Mr. Andy Andrade from RIDE is on the line. Okay, so not speaking, then he crossed out. Welcome, Mr. Andrade. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Well, actually, Elizabeth, you stole my thunder because I was going to talk about Enroll Rhode Island. Chairman, you talked initially about survey works and the fact that there were parents that didn't feel that they were informed, and we took that to heart, and that's one of the reasons why we did begin Enroll Rhode Island. It was launched in November, and the goal was to provide, as Elizabeth said, to provide easy access to Rhode Island schools and educational programs, including charter schools. As was mentioned, I think one of the big things here is that common application to any charter school. And also, there's detailed information about every school, what they specialize in, what they offer, and all in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So I think that you raised a great point in talking about students that don't have parents or guardians to advocate for them. I think this is one of the things that RIDE is doing, and we're getting this out to as many people as possible so that everyone can avail themselves and apply for a charter school if they feel that that's in their best interest. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of that. You also, in your bill, talk about an annual report. We think that's very reasonable, a smart thing to do. Chairman, you talked about equalized numbers in special education and ELL students, and I think that's very, very difficult to achieve. And I think you already brought up one of the key factors there, and the fact that I do believe that parents, especially with a special needs student that has very, very involved needs, will most likely stay with the public school that has a reputation of being able to provide those services. However, one of the things that I suggest in these two areas, special education students, Jim Parisi mentioned the disparity between special education money spent in charter schools as opposed to traditional public schools. Even if you look at the charter schools letter that they sent you, which I had a copy of, they even acknowledge those disparities. I'm very hopeful that we can very soon, and there's talk about it, Rep. Maury knows a lot about this, have a joint task force to look at the funding formula again, update it, which is very much needed. And one of the things that we need to look at specifically are these disparities in special education numbers. As you know, right now, there's a 7% holdback, where districts can hold back 7% of any funding that goes when a student leaves to go to a charter school in their district. You know, we need to drill down on the data that looks at those disparities and come up with something that's reasonable, that maybe that 7% becomes 10%, 12%, whatever it is, based on data. The other issue is ELL students. As you know, in 2017, the General Assembly, in your wisdom, came up with a categorical for ELL students. And one of the things I would strongly suggest and hope that you will advocate with us, last year there was $5 million in that categorical. And last year we advocated to go to the 7.5 million. Eventually it'll be capped at 10. But this year in this budget, if we're able, I strongly suggest that we push that number to 7.5 million. And as you know, the General Assembly stipulates that this money must go toward high-quality programs in ELL. And these students that absolutely need these services will get what they deserve. So these are two areas I think that will help bring some equity in these two areas, and I hope that this will happen as we move forward, Chairman. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Andre? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just quickly.
Yes.
I got-
Representative Bia.
Yes. So where Mr. Andrew was speaking about equity, so and I know he spoke about the special education and MLO students in regards of the charter schools, right? And where I think Representative McNamara asked about where that just open, like, open that gap that everyone can just apply, then parent probably opt out, which, but then Mr. Andrew was speaking about that won't be much more feasible. Why wouldn't it be feasible when schools are held accountable, districts are held accountable based on those population? So why wouldn't charter school be held accountable with the same thing? Because, for example, in Providence, in like few schools that Rhode has classified these schools as failing schools, but has 70% of our MLA population newcomer. So I think it would be very disadvantaged saying that our charter schools shouldn't be, applied to those standards also.
I agree.
Yes, I do as well.
So when we talk about equity, so I think we should go across the board instead of like saying that charter school, because so if a school in Providence have about 60 or 70% of MLO students, newcomer students are just entering the U.S. first year, like have never ever put their foot in the school building, entering in Providence and be in high school. Rhode is holding these schools accountable, but at the same time, charter school are having a free pass, like was selecting who they want to select, and with flying colors. So I think this where my problem lies with this whole equity in education,
Right.
especially when it comes to the line of inner city, Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, and these places.
Chairman, this is Andy. I think Rep. Amore's idea about having the holistic or universal lottery where everyone's involved is a great idea, honestly.
Oh, I do. We'll put that in the bill. Are there any further questions for Mr. Andre? Thank you. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 5069.